The first signs. The sea was restless that night. A thick mist hung low over the water, swallowing the moonlight before it could reach the waves. Jacob Reeves, a seasoned fisherman, leaned over the edge of his boat, scanning the dark expanse. He had spent decades on these waters, but something felt off. The usual night sounds, gulls, the creaking of his boat, the rhythmic lapping of the tide, were gone. Then he saw them. At first, it was just a flicker beneath the surface, like a reflection of distant lightning. Then another. And another. A cluster of pulsing blue lights drifted through the water, moving too smoothly, too deliberately. Jacob narrowed his eyes, gripping the worn wooden railing. Jellyfish? No, these were different. Their glow pulsed in perfect rhythm, like signals. Messages. One of them broke the surface, its gelatinous form shimmering in the moonlight. It was nearly 3 feet wide, its tendrils unnaturally long, twisting and twitching as if reacting to something unseen. A warning. A call. Jacob hesitated, then reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the creature's surface, it shuddered violently. The glow flared, blindingly bright. The other lights beneath the water flickered in response, and then, just as suddenly, they were gone. Jacob staggered back, blinking away the afterimage. His heart pounded. He had spent a lifetime pulling strange things from the sea, but this was different. By morning, the entire town was talking about it. Along the shore, a grotesque spectacle awaited. Hundreds of deep-sea fish lay strewn across the sand, their bodies twisted, eyes bulging. Some still twitched, though they had no business being alive in the daylight. They weren't fish people recognized, not the usual cod, mackerel, or even sharks. These were from the abyss, creatures meant to stay in the lightless trenches of the world. Jacob watched from the pier, his cigarette burning down to the filter, forgotten between his fingers. "They're running from something," came a voice behind him. He turned to see Dr. Evelyn Carter, the marine biologist from the university. Unlike the others who gawked and took photos, she was crouched down, gloved hands carefully examining a 6-foot-long eel-like creature with translucent skin. "What do you mean, running?" Jacob asked, frowning. She didn't look up. Animals don't change their patterns without reason. Something pushed them up here. She gestured to the fish-strewn beach. Something big. Jacob exhaled, watching the waves. His father had once told him that the sea spoke in warnings, that old sailors knew when something was wrong before science caught up. He had laughed at those stories as a boy. Now, standing before an ocean that had gone eerily still, he wasn't laughing. Then came the first real sign. A low, resonant hum rippled through the air, deep, vibrating, impossible to trace. Every phone, every radio along the shore crackled with static. A dog howled. Somewhere in the distance, a child began to cry. The ocean swelled, not with waves, but with something beneath it, something rising. Jacob clenched his fists. The sea was speaking again. And this time, it wasn't a whisper. Descent into darkness. The hum lingered in the air, a vibration felt more than heard. It settled deep in Jacob's bones, gnawing at instincts he had long learned to trust. He watched the horizon, expecting something, anything, to break the surface. But the ocean remained deceptively calm, its glassy surface betraying none of the chaos beneath. Dr. Evelyn Carter had wasted no time. Within hours, she had assembled a team, securing a research submersible from a nearby naval base. A state-of-the-art deep-sea vessel, built for extreme pressures, its reinforced glass could withstand the crushing weight of the abyss. Or so they hoped. Jacob hadn't intended to join them. He was a fisherman, not a scientist. But when Evelyn had looked him in the eye and said, "You've seen it too, haven't you?" he had found himself unable to refuse. Now, as the submersible slipped beneath the waves, he regretted saying yes. The descent was slow, the world outside shifting from midnight blue to an infinite blackness. Tiny flecks of light, bioluminescent creatures, floated past like dying embers, momentary interruptions in the void. Evelyn studied the monitors, her brow furrowed. "We should be seeing more movement." Jacob turned to her. "What do you mean?" She adjusted the controls, guiding the sub deeper. "In healthy ecosystems, even down here, there's life. Swarming schools of lanternfish, cephalopods, deep-sea jellies, but it's empty." Jacob glanced out the window. The blackness beyond felt thick, as if it were swallowing everything whole. Then, the sonar pinged. A single, sharp note echoed through the cabin. Evelyn's breath caught. Another ping. Then another. Faster. Louder. Closer. Something was coming. The first thing they saw was the carcass. It was a whale, or what had once been one. The body drifted lifelessly, massive ribs splitting through torn flesh. But it wasn't decomposition that had done this. Something had ripped it apart. Jacob swore under his breath. Evelyn gripped the controls. What the hell could do that? Before he could answer, the sonar let out a piercing screech, a distorted, warbling cry that sent a shiver through the cabin. Then, from the darkness, the mist appeared. Thick, swirling tendrils of black smoke, rolling in slow waves. But it wasn't smoke. It moved. Shifted. Reacted to their presence. "Evelyn," Jacob said, voice tight. "I see it." Her fingers hovered over the controls. "We need to." The sub lurched violently. Instruments flickered. A deep, resonant force pulled at them, something unseen dragging them closer to the mist. Jacob gritted his teeth. He could feel it, an unnatural pressure, as if the very ocean was contracting around them. Then, through the haze, something stirred. A shape. Impossibly large. A single, glowing eye blinked open, staring directly at them. And then, the feed cut to static. The truth unveiled. Jacob gasped as the submersible jolted violently, the pressure inside the cabin pressing against his chest. Alarms blared, the red glow of emergency lights casting deep shadows across the control panel. The static-filled screen flickered erratically, struggling to maintain a signal. "Evelyn, what just happened?" Jacob's voice was tight, barely concealing his fear. Dr. Carter's hands flew across the controls, stabilizing their descent. "We lost all external feeds, but the sub is still intact." Then, a deep, guttural sound resonated from the abyss, so low it was more felt than heard, a vibration that rattled their bones. Something was down there. Jacob turned to the viewport. The swirling black mist had thickened, moving with an eerie sentience. It coiled and twisted like smoke in water, yet it did not disperse. It held shape, shifting between tendrils and vast, undulating waves. And within it, a silhouette moved. Something enormous. Evelyn's trembling fingers adjusted the sub's cameras, desperate to get a clearer view. Then, the screen stabilized. The image was unlike anything ever recorded. The creature, if it could even be called that, was barely visible, its form shrouded in the abyss. What they could see defied understanding. A vast, impossibly large mass, its surface shifting like liquid flesh. No fins, no scales, just an amorphous void, absorbing the light around it. Then, the eye appeared again, vast, unblinking, aware. It wasn't the dull, instinctual eye of an animal. It was something else. Something intelligent. Jacob's breath hitched. "It's watching us." The sonar shrieked. The sound pierced through the cabin, warping into something unnatural, a series of deep, reverberating tones that made Jacob's teeth ache. Evelyn's hands clenched around the console. "It's communicating," she whispered. Jacob didn't reply. His gut told him this wasn't a message. It was a warning. Then, the sub started rising. Not by Evelyn's controls. Something was lifting them. The black mist coiled around the sub, forcing them upward at an unnatural speed. The depth gauge spiraled rapidly. The pressure should have crushed them, but the sub remained intact, as if something was controlling the ocean itself. Evelyn's voice was barely audible. "It's letting us go." Jacob didn't understand. If this thing wanted them dead, it could have crushed them like an empty can. Instead, it was returning them. The sub shot through the darkness, breaking the surface with a violent gasp of water and air. They were back. Hours later, Evelyn replayed the footage on a laptop in the research station. Scientists and naval officers gathered around, silent as the screen displayed the colossal eye staring through the mist. The room was dead quiet. Then, the signal glitched. For a fraction of a second, the footage flickered, revealing something far worse. A second eye. Watching from deeper below. Evelyn closed the laptop. "We weren't looking at it," she murmured. Jacob exhaled sharply. No. It was showing itself to us. The final warning. The ocean had never been so silent. Jacob stood on the shore, his boots sinking into the damp sand. The town was unusually quiet. No gulls, no waves crashing against the pier, no wind stirring the salty air. The sea had stilled, as if holding its breath. Behind him, the research station buzzed with frantic activity. Dr. Evelyn Carter sat at a monitor, reviewing the footage for the 100th time. But there was nothing new to learn, only that they had seen something that should not exist. And it had seen them too. A knock on the door made Evelyn flinch. A naval officer, Commander Ellis, stepped inside, his expression grim. "We're pulling out," he announced. "Classifying all footage, shutting this operation down." Evelyn stared at him. "You can't be serious. We need to study this. We need to warn people." Ellis shook his head. "Warn them about what? We don't even know what we're dealing with." Jacob, who had remained quiet until now, exhaled sharply. "You saw the second eye." Ellis hesitated. His silence spoke volumes. "They weren't running from it," Jacob said, voice low. "The deep-sea creatures, those fish washing up, the whales disappearing. They weren't fleeing that thing." Evelyn turned toward him, realization dawning in her eyes. "They were being pushed up." Jacob nodded. "Because something else is coming." That night, the ocean changed. It started with the lights. Strange, flickering glows pulsed beneath the surface, stretching for miles. Not like the jellyfish Jacob had seen before, these were larger, brighter, deliberate. Then came the shadows. The water darkened, not from the setting sun, but from movement beneath the waves. A vast, undulating mass, too large, too deep to be fully seen, but undeniably there. The town had gathered by the shore, their unease growing. Radios crackled with static, the deep hum returning, louder this time, vibrating through their chests. Evelyn gripped Jacob's arm. "It's here." The tide pulled back, exposing the seabed for nearly a mile. A hush fell over the crowd. People whispered, stepped backward. Somewhere, a child started crying. And then, the horizon rose. Not the sky, not the water. Something else. Something massive, eclipsing the stars, blocking out the world beyond. It wasn't just one entity. It was many. The first eye had been a warning. The second had been watching. But this was the arrival. Jacob took a step back. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. The sea had been speaking all along. And they had failed to listen. A final, deafening sound split the air, a deep, resonant note that sent waves crashing, power lines bursting, the earth itself trembling. And then, silence. The ocean remained still. Waiting.